And dividend irrelevance theory. This theory was developed by Modigliani and Miller. Was developed by Modigliani and Miller, who argued that Modigliani and Miller, who argued that company's dividend policy, who argued that the company's dividend policy, who argued that the company's dividend policy does not affect the value of the firm. The company's dividend policy does not affect the value of the firm. Does not affect the value of the firm. Full stop. The theory operates under the following assumption. The theory operates under the following assumptions. The theory operates under the following assumptions. Number one. Capital market is efficient and perfect. Capital market, and the capital market is perfect and efficient. Number two, there are no transaction costs. There are no transaction costs. There are no transaction costs associated with the flotation of shares. There is no flotation cost associated with the flotation of shares. Number three, there are no corporate and personal taxes on dividends. There are no corporate and personal taxes on dividends. Another one, the company investment policy is independent. The company investment policy is independent of its dividend policy. Is independent of its investment policy. Yeah, that investment policy is independent from the company's dividend policy. Another one, there is no uncertainty in the market. There is no uncertainty. There is no uncertainty. There is no uncertainty in the market. Hence, all the investors use the same discounting rate. Hence, the investor use the same discounting rates. Good. So those are the assumption of Modigliani and Miller of dividend irrelevance. That the dividend policy of a company does not affect the value of the company. Another paragraph. Based on the above assumption, PO is equals to P1 plus D1, 1 plus R. MP1, that's the amount of new funds to be raised. Yeah, so in this case, you'll take the amount of the investment, you minus the expected profit, and then you add ND1. And to get the number of new shares to be issued, you take MP1 over P1. And then to get the value of the company, you take N plus N, you multiply by the market price per share, and then you minus the investment, you add the profit, all of it 1 plus R, where so the administration, May 2019. May 2019, question 2C. What a group of companies belong to a risk class of which the appropriate capitalization rate is 10%. So R is 10%. The company currently has in issue 200,000 ordinary share selling at 50. And you see that N is the current number of ordinary share. So we have 200,000 share. PO is the current market price per share, and it is selling at 50 shillings. The company is contemplating the declaration of dividend at the rate of 3 shillings per share at the end of the current financial year. The expected dividend to be paid, that is D1, we have is 3 shillings. Required. Using Modigliani-Miller proposition of dividend irrelevance, determine 1 is the price of the ordinary share at the end of the year, assuming the dividend is not declared. Number 2, the price of the ordinary share at the end of the year, assuming that the dividend is declared. And then number 3, assuming that the company generates a net profit of 2 million, that is X. X is the expected profit. The expected profit is 2 million. And makes new investment of 4 million. I, so that is the investment amount, which is 4 million. Show that under the Modigliani-Miller assumption, payment or non-payment of dividend has no effect on the company's value. So we need to prove that the dividend policy of the company does not affect the value of the firm. However, the company pays a dividend of 3, or they do not pay the dividend, the value of the company won't change. And how do we prove that? So first of all, we get the current value of the company. And to get the current value of the company, we have 200,000 shares, each with a market price of 50 shillings. So how much is the current value of the company? We get 10 million. So now we need to prove that the payment or non-payment of the dividend, the value of the company will still remain to be 10 million. So we start with no dividends. Assuming we don't pay the dividend, so we want to prove that the value of the company won't change. So if you don't pay the dividend, we need to determine the expected market price per share, of which PO is equals to P1 plus D1, 1 plus R. PO is the current market price per share, which is 50, is equals to P1. So this is what we need, P1 plus D1. How much is our D1? 0. You see, in this case, we are saying that there is no payment of dividends. So therefore, if there is no payment of dividend, dividend will be 0. 1 plus R. R is 10%, which is 0.1. So 50 times 1.1, that is 55 shillings, right? So P1 will be equal to 55 shillings. So if you don't pay the dividend, the price will be 55. Now, in case you are told, for example, number 1, what was the question? Number 1 was the price of the ordinary share at the end of the year, assuming a dividend is not declared, so the price will be 55. Then number 2, the price of the ordinary share at the end of the year, assuming the dividend is declared. If we declare the dividend, the share should always trade at X dividend. So you just take 55 minus the expected dividend of 3. That will be 52 shillings. Yeah, but I don't want to answer that fast. But in the case we declare the dividend, you just take the market price, then you minus the dividend, so that the dividend, the share should trade at X dividends. So now that means if you don't pay the dividend, this is the expected market price. One of the assumptions of MM was that the company is all equity financed. And if the company is all equity financed, for us to invest in a new project, we must raise all the funds from the retained earnings or from the issue of new shares. There is no borrowing. So it assumes that the company is all equity financed. So if this is the expected market price per share P1, how much do we need to raise? So determine MP1. MP1, you take the investment amount, then you minus. We're expecting some profit. So that profit will act as the retained earnings. So we minus the profit, then you add. You need to raise more funds so that you can facilitate the payment of dividends. So ND1. I'm just taking this. So investment amount, we need to invest 4 million. That's what we need to invest. But we're expecting some profits. So that profit will act as our retained earnings. So you minus the expected profit of 2 million. So that means the only amount we need to raise from the issue of new shares It's only 2 million. But you need to raise enough funds to facilitate the payment of dividends. So take N. N is the current number of shares, which is 200,000 shares. And then you need to pay them the dividends times D1. But in this case, we are not paying any dividends. So therefore, in this case, how much do you need to raise from the issue of new shares? So we need 2 million. If we need 2 million, now the question is, for us to get the 2 million from the issue of new shares, how many new shares will we have to issue? So that's when I will determine M. M is the number of new shares to be issued. We take MP1, that's the amount to raise, we divide by P1. We need to raise 2 million. We divide by the expected market price per share. At that time, the market price will be 55 shillings. So that means we'll have to issue how many new shares? About 6? 364 new shares. Those are the new shares that we'll have to issue. And then from there, you can determine the value of the company. NPA will take the current number of shares plus the number of new shares to be issued. You take the current share plus the number of new shares to be issued, you determine the total number of shares. Then you multiply by the expected market price per share. So that's P1. And then you minus the investment amount. Then you add the expected profit. All of it you divide by 1 plus R. So our NPO, N is the current number of shares. We have 200,000 shares. You add N, the new shares to be issued, which is 36,364. Once we get the total number of shares, you multiply by the market price per share. And the market price per share will be 55. Then you deduct the amount you invested, of which you invested 4 million. Then you add the expected profit of 2 million. All of it divided by 1 plus R 0.1. So how much will be the value of the company? What kind of amount of? Yeah, I still get 10 million. Also now we prove that also the value after you pay the dividend is going to be the same. So now with the dividend payment, we follow the same steps. The first thing you do, you determine the market price per share. PO is P1 plus D1, 1 plus R. PO is the current market price per share, which is 50, is equals to P1, that's what we need to determine, plus D1. Now, with the payment of dividend, we have proposed a payment of dividend of 3 shillings. Then you divide by 1 plus R. R was 10%. So this is 1.1. 50 times 1.1 will get 55 is equals to P1 plus 3. So therefore, to get P1, you take 55. You take this to the other side, minus 3, and you get 52. So that means if you pay the dividends, therefore the market price will be 52 because it has to trade at X dividends. If this is the expected market price per share, how much do we need to raise from the issue of new shares? So we determine MP1. That's the amount of new funds to be raised. So how much do you need to invest minus the expected profit plus you expect to pay dividends, ND1. Investment amount, we need to invest 4 million, but there is expected profit to offset. So the expected profit will remain the financial needs. So you minus 2 million. So that means from the issue of share, you need 2 million, but you need sufficient funds to pay the dividends. That is, we pay the dividend to the shareholders. So we have N is the current number of shares, which is 200. and you are proposing to pay a dividend per share of 3 shillings. So that one you get to 600, you get an amount of 2.6. What I mean is this: we need to invest 4 million, but there is expected profit of 2 million. But remember, we pay the dividend from the profit. If we pay the dividend from the profit, we expect a profit of 2 million. So that means it's a profit after tax. We pay the dividend so that we get the retained earnings. So what we have done, we pay the dividend. And how do we pay the dividend? So we have 200,000 ordinary share, and each we are paying a dividend of 3. So how much will be the retained earnings? So this is the profit after tax minus the dividend. So this is 1.4. So therefore, if 1.5 is the retained earnings, this is what we need. You minus the profit you already have, 1.4 million. How much do you get? 0.6. If we need 2.6, now 2.6 is the amount we need raised from the issue of new shares. So therefore, how many new shares will we issue? So N, you take NP1 over P1. So you need to raise 2.6 million shillings, but the expected market price per share will be 52 shillings. That means we issue how many new shares? Sorry? 50,000. 50,000. So you have to issue new 50,000. So from there now we can determine the value of the company. And you take the current number of shares plus the number of new shares to be issued. You multiply by the market price per share. You minus the investment, you add the expected profit, 1 plus R. So N, we have 200,000 shares. Then we add the number of new shares to be issued. So that means we'll be having 250,000 shares. Then you multiply by the market price per share, which will be 52 shillings. You minus the amount you are spending to invest, and that's an amount of 4 million. But you add the expected profit of 4 million. Out of it, you divide by 1 plus R. I still get so that's how we prove that the payment or non-payment of dividend does not affect the value of the fund. So we can copy now. December 2021, question 1B. December 2021, question 1B. Z are limited as a cost of equity of 20%. That is R. R is 20%. The company currently has in issue 500,000 ordinary shares. So N, it's 500,000 shares and selling on the security exchange at 200 shillings. PO, the current market price per share is 200 shillings. The firm earnings per share at the end of the current year is estimated to be 15 and intend to maintain a constant dividend payout ratio of 60. So day one, you take the earnings per share, which is 15 shillings, you multiply by the dividend payout ratio of 60%, which will get 9 shillings. The company expects net income of 6 million. That is X. X is expected profit of 6 million. And the available investment proposal are estimated to require 12 million. So investment require 12 million. Required. Using Modigliani-Miller proposition on dividend irrelevance, show that the payment or non-payment of dividends does not affect the value of the current firm. The payment or non-payment does not affect the value of the firm. So first of all, determine the current value. We have 500,000 shares, which is trading at 200 shillings. So so start with no dividends. We want to prove that whether you pay or you don't pay the dividend, that the value of the company is going to be 100 million. So with no dividend, the first step is to determine the expected market price per share. PO is P1 plus B1, 1 plus R. PO we have is 200 shillings. P1 is what we need. You add D1. So in this case, with no payment of dividend, therefore no dividend. 1 plus R, 0.2. So 200 times 20%, that is 240. Yeah, so that means if you don't pay the dividend, the market price will be 240. But if you pay the dividend, the market price per share will be 240. You minus 9, and you get to 31. If this is the expected market price per share, how much do you need to raise in order to invest? So you determine MP1, and that's the expected amount new funds to be raised. You take the investment amount minus the expected profit, you add the total dividends. We need to invest 12 million, you minus the expected profit of 6 million, then you add N is the current number of shares, which is 500,000, and D1, which is 0. So in that case, we need 6 million. So that means 6 million will be raised through the issue of new shares. Since of the 12 million, 6 million will be from the retained earnings, the other half from the issue of shares. If we issue shares, how many new shares will we have to issue? So N is MP1 over P1. And so we take MP1, which is 6 million, we divide by P1, which is 240. You get 25? 25 number. So these are the new number of new shares to be issued. So now with that, we can be able to determine the value of the company. Take the current number of shares plus the number of new shares to be issued so that you get the total number of shares. You multiply by the market price per share, you get the value of the equity. Once you get the value of the equity, you deduct the amount you're investing. And then to the equity, you also add retained earnings or the expected profit. Then 1 over R. So NPO, so we have N. And so N we have it's 500,000 plus M. M is the new shares to be issued, which is 25. Then P1. P1 is 240 minus the investment amount of 12 million. Then plus X. X is expected profit of 6 million. Out of it to divide by 1 plus R, 0.2. Still get 100 megawatt. 100 million shillings. So now with dividend payments, so we follow the same process. First of all, determine the expected market price per share, where PO is P1 plus D1, 1 plus R. PO is 200, P1 plus D1. So the expected dividend per share to be paid is 9, then 1 plus R, 0.2. So this one will be 240 is equals to P1 plus 9, and therefore to get P1, to get 231. So if that's the expected market price per share, you also need to determine how much new funds do we need to raise. So to get the amount of new funds, that's the NP1, so that you take the investment amount, you minus the expected profit, NB1. So the expected investment is 12 million. You minus the expected profit of 6 million, and of which N we have is the current number of shares, which is 500,000. You multiply by the dividend per share, which is 9. That one you get is 4.5, and you will get an amount of 6 plus 4.5, you get 10.5. So that's the amount of new funds we need to raise from the issue of shares. If that's what we need from the new issue of shares, how many new shares will we issue? So N, take NP1 over P1, and where we have 10.5, we divide by P1. So P1 is 231. So how many new shares will we have to issue? 45? 455. Good. And now you can be able to get the value of the company. MP will take the current number of shares plus new shares to be issued, P1 minus the profits, sorry, minus the investment, and then you add the expected profit 1 plus. So MP will take the current number of shares, which we have 500,000. You want the new shares to be issued, 45,455. P1 is 231. You minus the investment, which is 12 million. And then you add X. 1 plus R is 0.2. So MP in that case will get an amount of? Yeah, you still get 100 million. Simple. So you can copy. You can go and try this illustration. November 2019, question 5C.